Hither. I want you to find a comfortable position. Adjust your pillows, pull the blanket a little closer, and let the weight of the world outside your window fade into the background. We are going to travel back in time, not to a place of noise and chaos, but to a place of profound, heavy silence. We are exploring a moment in history that feels like a fever dream. A period where the line between heroism and tragedy blurred into the mist of the Ukrainian marshes. We are talking about why you wouldn't last 24 hours as a Chernobyl liquidator. Before we begin our journey into the night of April 1986, we must understand what a liquidator truly was. They were the liquidators of the consequences of the Chernobyl catastrophe. It is a cold, bureaucratic name for the hundreds of thousands of souls fired. Soldiers, miners, and janitors who were called upon to do the impossible. They were the human shield between a dying reactor and the rest of the world. Most of them didn't know the true nature of the enemy they were fighting. They were simply told they were needed, and so they went. Now, let your mind drift. Imagine the air is cool. Imagine the scent of pine trees and the distant, rhythmic hum of a sleeping city. We are going back to the beginning. The date is April 26, 1986. The time is exactly 1:23 in the morning. In the town of Pripyat, less than 3 kilometers from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The world is draped in the soft, velvet indigo of a spring night. It is a Saturday morning. For the 50,000 residents of this city of the future, the weekend has just begun. There are dreams behind those darkened windows, dreams of Sunday soccer matches, of fishing in the cooling pond, of the upcoming May Day parades where children would carry red carnations through the streets. The air is incredibly still. If you were standing on a balcony in Pripyat at this very moment, you might hear the faint, mechanical heartbeat of the power plant in the distance. It was a comforting sound. To the people here, the atom was a peaceful giant, a tireless servant that provided warmth and light. There was no fear. There was only the gentle rustle of the leaves in the red forest and the occasional call of a night bird. Then the world holds its breath. Inside reactor number 4, something has gone wrong. Not a loud, screeching mechanical failure, but a quiet, internal shift. A series of events, tangled in human error and design flaws, leads to a sudden, catastrophic surge of power. There is a thud. It isn't the kind of sound that wakes a city, but it is deeper vibration that travels through the soles of the feet of the few night shift workers walking the perimeter. And then, a second later, the sky tears open. The explosion is not like the movies. There is no massive fireball that consumes the horizon. Instead, there is a heavy metallic rother sound of 2,000 tons of steel and concrete being tossed into the air like a coin. The roof of the reactor building vanishes. For a fleeting second, the core of the reactor is exposed to the night sky. A beam of light shoots upward. It is beautiful. It is a haunting, shimmering pillar of blue and violet light, reaching high into the atmosphere, ionizing the very air it touches. It looks like a lighthouse for a ghost ship. From a distance, it is mesmerizing. It is the most beautiful thing anyone in Pripyat will ever see, and it is the most deadly dot in the seconds following the blast. A strange silence returns. It is heavier now. It is a silence filled with falling ash. Not the black, soot-heavy ash of a wood fire, but a light grey, almost crystalline dust. It drifts down like gentle snow, settling on the leaves of the trees, on the railings of the balconies, and on the skin of the few curious souls who have stepped outside to see what the commotion was. They do not know it yet, but the air has changed. It tastes of metal. If you were there, you would feel a slight tingle on your tongue. A faint scent of ozone, like the air right before a massive thunderstorm. But there is no rain coming at the plant. The confusion is absolute. The men in the control room are staring at dials that make no sense. Their instruments are telling them that the reactor is gone, but the human mind is a resilient thing. It refuses to believe in the impossible. They believe a tank has exploded. They believe it is a fire. They call the firefighters from the local station, the men who will become the first liquidators of the night. Imagine being one of those men. Your name is Vasily. You are young, strong, and you have a wife at home who is expecting a child. The alarm rings, and you jump into your truck. You think it's just another roof fire. You haven't even put on your heavy gear because the night is warm. You race toward the plant, and as you get closer, you see the rubble. You see chunks of what looks like black stone scattered across the road. You don't know that these stones are graphite from the core of the reactor. You don't know that to stand near one of them for just a few minutes is to receive a lifetime's worth of energy. You simply step out of the truck, your boots crunching on the debris, and you begin to unroll the hoses. The heat near the reactor is intense, but it isn't just the heat of a fire. It is a prickling, biting heat. Within minutes, the firefighters begin to feel a strange sensation. Their skin turns a deep, sunburnt red. They begin to vomit, a sudden and violent reaction that they attribute to the smoke. They feel an overwhelming exhaustion, a weight in their limbs that makes the fire hoses feel like they are made of lead. Yet, they stay. They climb the ladders to the roof of Reactor 3 to prevent the fire from spreading. They stand in the shadow of the blue beam, working in the shimmering light of the exposed core. They are breathing in the dust. Every breath pulls millions of microscopic, glowing embers into their lungs. As the sun begins to rise on the morning of April 26th, the city of Pripyat wakes up. The children see the smoke and the damaged building, but life goes on. They walk to school. They play in the sandboxes. They breathe the air that is now thick with the invisible breath of the reactor. You, as a visitor in this time, would see the invisible danger differently. You would notice the birds. The birds are the first to know. They stop singing. Some of them fall from the sky, their tiny hearts giving out in the ionized air. You would notice the pine trees closest to the plant. By the afternoon, their needles are no longer green. They are turning a sickly, rusted red. This will become known as the Red Forest, a place where the very biology of the earth has been rewritten by the atom. By mid-morning, the first wave of liquidators is already collapsing. The hospitals in Pripyat are filling up with men whose faces are the color of sunset. The doctors are confused. They have never seen anything like this. They strip the men of their clothes and throw the uniforms into the basement tuniforms so radioactive that even decades later, they will still emit a hum of deadly energy that can be detected through the floor. But the world outside does not know. The Soviet authorities are silent. They are waiting for reports, for data, for someone to tell them that it isn't as bad as it looks. Meanwhile, the reactor continues to breathe. It is a volcanic maw, spewing gases and particles into the wind, heading north toward Belarus and eventually toward Europe. Late in the afternoon, a new group of liquidators arrives. These are the soldiers. Many are teenagers, conscripts who were pulled from their barracks and told they were going on a training exercise. They arrive in open-top trucks, wearing standard cotton uniforms. No lead vests, no respirators. Just the simple cloth of a Soviet soldier. They are told to set up a perimeter. They stand on the roads, directing traffic as the dust settles on their shoulders like dandruff. They smoke cigarettes, the smoke from their lungs mixing with the smoke from the ruins. They eat sandwiches in the open air, unknowingly consuming the very particles they were sent to contain. If you were one of them, you would start to feel a strange metallic taste in your mouth, as if you had been sucking on a copper coin. Your eyes would begin to sting, a persistent itch that no amount of rubbing could soothe. You would feel a headache blooming behind your temples, a dull, rhythmic throb as the first 24 hours draw to a close. The scale of the disaster is starting to crystallize in the minds of the experts in Moscow. They realize that this is not a fire. This is a planetary wound. They begin to call for more. More men, more machines, more lives to throw into the breach. They need miners to dig under the reactor to prevent a meltdown from reaching the water table. They need helicopter pilots to fly directly over the open core to drop sand and boron into the fire. The pilots are perhaps the most courageous of all. They fly into the blue beam. As they hover over the crater, the radiation is so intense that it fries the electronics of their helicopters. The pilots look down into the eyes of the devil, seeing the glowing, molten mass of the core. They drop their loads and return, only to do it again and again and again. 20 sorties a day, 30 sorties a day. Their skin begins to darken. They develop nuclear tans. They are cheerful, joking about the extra rations of vodka they are being given to flush out the radiation. They believe the vodka helps. Everyone believes the vodka helps. It is a shield of glass and spirits against an enemy that operates on a subatomic level by the end of the first day. The city of Pripyat is still not evacuated. People are walking their dogs. Couples are holding hands in the park. But the liquidators on the front lines, the firefighters and the early responders are already entering the second stage of radiation sickness. I hope you are settled in, that the lights are low, and that you are ready to slip back into the stillness of the past. Tonight, we return to the edge of the exclusion zone. We are moving closer now, leaving the safety of the distant horizon and stepping into the very heart of the night of April 26, 1986. Before we continue, take a deep breath. Feel the cool air fill your lungs. It is a simple act, one we take for granted. But for the men we are about to meet, the air itself was changing. We are going to witness the first hours through the eyes of the firefighters, the boys of the Pripyat and Chernobyl brigades. They were the first to answer the call, the first to touch the fire, and the first to realize that this was a night unlike any other in human history. Imagine the ticking of a clock in a quiet hallway. Imagine the smell of damp concrete and old wool. We are going back to the fire station. The night is still young in the Pripyat fire station. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of tobacco and floor wax. It is a quiet shift. Some of the men are resting on narrow cots, their boots polished and lined up neatly by the door. Perhaps someone is playing a quiet game of cards, the soft snap of the deck against a wooden table, the only sound in the room. Others might be staring out the window at the distant silhouette of the power plant, which always sat on the horizon like a sleeping giant, glowing with 1,000 tiny amber lights. Then, at 1:25 a.m., the silence is shattered. It isn't a melodic bell. It is a harsh, electric rasper alarm that cuts through dreams and conversations alike. There is no time for confusion, only the mechanical reflex of training. You hear the heavy thud of feet hitting the floor. You hear the rhythmic clack-clack of metal buckles as they pull on their canvas trousers. These aren't the high-tech, flame-retardant suits of today. They are wearing simple tunics, heavy boots, and those iconic wide-brimmed metal helmets that catch the dim light of the station's overhead lamps. They move with a practiced, calm urgency. There is no shouting. There is only the sound of heavy engines turning over. The low growl of the ZIL-131 fire trucks vibrating through the concrete floor. The garage doors roll up with a metallic groan, revealing the cool, indigo night of the Ukrainian spring. As the trucks roar out into the darkness, the wind whips against the men's faces. It feels good. It feels fresh. They think they are heading to a routine roof fire. In their minds, they are already calculating how many hours it will take to douse the flames, so they can return to their warm beds before the sun comes up. But as the trucks turn onto the long, straight road leading toward the plant, the horizon begins to change. The sky above Reactor 4 isn't orange like a normal fire. It is a color that doesn't belong in nature. It is a pulsing, electric violet. It is a shimmering, ghostly blue that seems to vibrate against the stars. The men watch it through the windshield, mesmerized. They have never seen a fire that glowed with the color of the deep ocean as they pull into the shadow of the reactor building. The scale of the destruction becomes clear. The wall of the turbine hall has been peeled back like a tin can. Huge blocks of concrete, some weighing tons, are scattered across the asphalt like discarded toys. There is a strange, shimmering mist hanging in the air, a mixture of steam, smoke, and something invisible that makes the hair on their arms stand up. The trucks come to a halt. The engines idle with a rhythmic thrum. The men step out, and for a moment they just stand there. The silence here is different. It is a heavy, pressurized silence, broken only by the crackle of burning bitumen on the roof. Under their boots, the ground feels strange. It is covered in debris. There are thousands of small, black, rectangular stones scattered everywhere. They look like chunks of coal, but they are heavy and dense. One of the firefighters, perhaps a young man named Leonid, reaches down. He sees a piece of this black stone lying near the wheel of the truck. Without thinking, he picks it up. It is warm. It feels strangely heavy in his palm, vibrating with a faint, internal energy. He tosses it aside, not knowing that he has just held a piece of the reactor's heart. He doesn't know that the graphite he just touched is emitting enough energy to rewrite his very biology in a matter of seconds to these men. Radiation was a word in a textbook. It was something that happened in a laboratory or a faraway war. It wasn't something you could see, smell, or feel. They looked at the fire and they saw an enemy they understood. They saw flames and they responded with water. They begin to roll out the hoses. You can hear the hollow thump of the canvas tubes hitting the ground, the metallic clink of the nozzles being locked into place. They start to pump. The water arches through the air, disappearing into the jagged maw of the ruined building. But something is wrong. The water doesn't seem to be putting the fire out. It turns to steam instantly, creating a thick white shroud that swallows the men as they work. They climb. Imagine climbing a vertical iron ladder in the dead of night, 70 meters above the ground. Your hands are gripping the cold metal rungs. Below you, the world is a chaotic landscape of twisted steel and shadows. Above you, the sky is that haunting, beautiful blue. Every breath you take is heavy. The air tastes like metal. It's a sharp copper tang, like putting your tongue on a 9-volt battery. It's dry, scratching at the back of your throat, making you want to cough, but you press on. They reach the roof of Reactor 3. which sits adjacent to the destroyed Reactor 4. The heat is suffocating, but it's a localized heat. In some spots, it's freezing cold. In others, it feels like standing in front of an open oven. The bitumen, the tar that holds the roof together, has begun to melt. It's sticky and black, clutching at their boots like quicksand. Every step requires a massive effort. Schlup. The sound of their boots pulling away from the melting tar is the only thing they can hear over the roar of the steam dot. And then the symptoms begin. Not slowly, but with a terrifying, silent suddenness. One of the men, standing near the edge of the roof, suddenly feels a wave of nausea so violent it knocks him to his knees. He thinks it's the smoke. He pulls his collar over his mouth, but it doesn't help. His head begins to throb with a pressure that feels like his skull is being squeezed in a vice. He looks at his hands. In the pale, flickering light of the fire, his skin looks different. It's turning a deep, angry red, as if he has been standing in the Saharan sun for hours. But it's only been 15 minutes. The red deepens into a dark brown, then a purplish hue. It's a nuclear tan, the mark of the atom. The men continue to work, fueled by adrenaline and a sense of duty that is hard for us to comprehend today. They aren't thinking about physics. They are thinking about their brothers and us. They are thinking about the city of Pripyat, just 3 kilometers away, where their wives and children are. Sleeping in blissful ignorance, they look down into the core, for those who stood at the very edge of the roof, and looked into the crater where the reactor used to be. The sight was haunting. They described seeing a well of light. Deep down in the ruins, there was a glowing, pulsating mass of molten fuel and graphite. It looked like a living thinger, glowing, heaving lung made of fire and light. It didn't flicker like a wood fire. It hummed, it hissed. It emitted a light so pure and so terrifying that it seemed to burn right through their retinas. One by one, the firefighters begin to stumble. The first to fall are taken back to the trucks. They are dizzy, their vision blurring. They complain that their skin feels like it's on fire, even though they are no longer near the flames. They feel an unquenchable thirst, a dryness that goes deeper than their throats, down into their very bones. Back at the station, the second shift is being called in. They arrive to see their friends being loaded into ambulances. The scene is one of quiet, grim confusion. There are no screams. The men are too exhausted, too drained by the invisible poison to cry out. They just sit on the bumpers of the trucks, staring at the ground, their faces darkened by the strange artificial tan. The ambulances speed toward Pripyat Hospital number 126. The drivers don't use their sirens. They don't want to wake the city. They glide through the empty streets, past the darkened apartment blocks, past the Rainbow Cinema, past the playground where children will play in just a few hours. If you were standing on the street as an ambulance passed, you wouldn't see anything unusual, just a white van in the night. But inside that van, the very air is becoming toxic. The clothes of the firefighters are so saturated with radioactive dust that the paramedics begin to feel nauseous just by standing near them by 4 a.m. The fire on the roof is largely extinguished. The men have done their job. They have prevented the fire from spreading to the other 3 reactors. They have saved the plant from a total meltdown. They are heroes in the most absolute sense of the word. But as the first hints of dawn begin to grey the eastern sky anew, more terrifying realization begins to settle over the engineers in the bunkers beneath the plant. They have been measuring the radiation with small, handheld meters. These meters have a limit. They can only measure up to 3.6 rentgens per hour. All night, the meters have been maxing out, stuck at the highest possible reading. The engineers assumed the meters were broken. They told themselves the radiation was high, but manageable. But then, a worker arrives with a high-capacity dosimeter, one designed for wartime use. He turns it on. He walks toward the ruins. The needle doesn't just move. It slams against the far side of the gauge. He checks the scale. He checks it again. His face goes pale, a ghostly white that contrasts sharply with the reddened faces of the firefighters. The reading isn't 3.6. It is 15 Hozard in some places. It is 30 Udo, to put that in perspective. A lethal dose is around 500. These men have been standing in a storm of energy, so powerful that it is effectively millions of chest X-rays every hour. They haven't just been fighting a fire. They have been standing inside a giant, invisible microwave. The realization spreads through the command center like a cold wave. The small fire they thought they were fighting doesn't exist. There is no reactor anymore. The core is gone. The heart of the plant has been turned into a volcanic fountain of isotopes. And the wind is starting to pick up as the sun finally crests the horizon, casting a long golden light over the Pripyat River. The city begins to wake up. The morning is beautiful. The birds are beginning to chirp, though their song sounds slightly off-key. The smell of blooming apple trees fills the air. But at the hospital, the firefighters are being moved to a special wing. They are being stripped of their clothes. Their wedding rings are taken off and placed in lead boxes. They look at each other, and for the first time, they see the fear in each other's eyes. The walking ghost phase is beginning. They feel a strange, temporary surge of energy, but the doctors know the truth. They know that these men, who were laughing and joking just 3 hours ago, are now made of something else. They have become the first casualties of a new kind of war. And as you lay there, listening to the sound of my voice, imagine the stillness of that morning, the contrast between the beautiful, sunny Saturday and the invisible poison that was settling into every crack of the pavement, every leaf of the trees, and every breath of the people. The first 24 hours are nearly over. The world still doesn't know. The city is still there, but the clock is ticking. And in the distance, the ruined reactor continues to glow with that beautiful, deadly blue light, waiting for the next wave of men to arrive. The silence is about to break. Sleep now, in the safety of your room. Let the weight of the blankets remind you that you are here, and the past is just a story. But remember the boys in the metal helmets, standing on a melting roof, fighting a ghost they couldn't see. We will continue their story in part 3. We will talk about the evacuation, the silence of the empty streets, and the arrival of the miners who dug into the earth to save the world. The morning of April 27, 1986, arrived with a deceptive, golden clarity. In the corridors of power, far from the smoking ruins and the metallic taste of the air, a different kind of silence was unfolding. It was the silence of bureaucracy, the heavy, muffled stillness of wood-paneled offices, the rhythmic clack of typewriters, and the thick, grey veils of cigarette smoke that hung in the air like stagnant clouds. Tonight, we move away from the fire and into the machinery of the state. We are going to explore how an army of 600,000 people was summoned from the fabric of ordinary life. We are talking about the birth of the liquidator. As you lie there, imagine the sound of a telephone ringing in a distant room. It is a persistent, mechanical trill that breaks the quiet of a Sunday morning. In apartments across the Soviet Union, from the coal mines of Tula to the wheat fields of Kazakhstan, men are waking up to a world that has already changed, though they do not know it yet. In Moscow and Kiev, the decision-makers are gathered around long tables. Imagine this scene. The room is dim, lit by heavy chandeliers. On the table lie maps of the Pripyat marshes, now covered in hand-drawn circles and frantic notations. There is the scent of strong tea, stale coffee, and the omnipresent smell of Bela Morcanel, cigarettes harsh, papery, and biting. The men at these tables are speaking in low, measured tones. They are looking at data that defies their understanding. They are realizing that the accident is actually a wound in the earth that cannot be closed by conventional means. They need more than firefighters now. They need an ocean of human beings. They need to liquidate the consequences. The word liquidator sounds clinical, doesn't it? It sounds like a chemical process or a mathematical correction, but in the weeks to follow, it would become a title of both honor and tragedy. It would apply to the bus driver, the student, the father of three, and the veteran of wars long past. The selection process was not a grand call to arms. It was a quiet, administrative hum. Imagine a clerk in a small military enlistment office. The sun is streaming through a dusty window, illuminating the dancing motes of dust in the air. The clerk is leafing through thick stacks of yellowing personnel files. He is looking for specific skills: truck drivers, heavy equipment operators, chemical specialists, and simple, able-bodied men. A stamp hits a piece of paper. Thump. A name is added to a list. A summons is typed out. For many, it began with a knock at the door in the middle of the night or a tap on the shoulder at a factory gate. You are needed for a special assignment, they were told. It is a civil defense exercise. It is your duty. There was no talk of atoms. There was no talk of invisible particles that could shatter a man's health in a matter of hours. There was only the weight of the motherland and the ingrained habit of obedience. These men were products of a system where the collective was everything and the individual was a single brick in a vast wall. Think of a farmer in a village hundreds of miles away. His name might be Mikhail. He is a man of the earth, with hands calloused by the plough and a face lined by the sun. He is told he is being mobilized for a short trip to help with a construction project. He packs a small bagger, change of clothes, some bread, a tin of meat, and a photo of his family. He kisses his wife goodbye on the porch, promising to be back in 2 weeks. He doesn't know that the clothes he is wearing will eventually have to be buried in a pit of concrete. He doesn't know that the air he is about to breathe will stay with him for the rest of his life. The mobilization was a massive, slow-moving tide. Thousands of buses were requisitioned from cities across the Republic. Imagine them long lines of yellow and red buses, normally used for school trips or factory commutes, now idling in long convoys on the highways. The drivers sit behind the wheels, staring at the road ahead, watching the needles of their fuel gauges. They are driving toward a destination they cannot find on most maps. As the convoys move, the atmosphere is strangely subdued. On the buses, the men are quiet. Some are sleeping, their heads leaning against the vibrating glass of the windows. Others are staring out at the passing forest, watching the birch trees blur into a silver haze. There is a sense of mystery, a touch of anxiety, but mostly there is a profound, stoic patience. They are soldiers of a silent war, marching to war, a front line that has no trenches and no visible enemy. Among them are the miners. These are men who understand the darkness. They are used to the crushing weight of the earth above them, the heat of the deep seams, and the constant presence of danger. They were called from the Donbass and Tula, told that the reactor was melting and threatened to burn through the concrete slab into the groundwater. If that happened, an explosion of steam could devastate the entire region. The miners were needed to dig a tunnel beneath the glowing heart of the machine. They were chosen because they were the toughest, the most resilient. Imagine them sitting in the back of a transport truck, their shovels and picks tucked between their knees. They are joking quietly, their voices low and gravelly. They think they are going to do what they have always done, fight the earth. They don't realize they are going to fight the very laws of physics. Then there are the engineers, men of slide rules and blueprints. They sit in the offices of the liquidator headquarters, their desks covered in telegrams and technical manuals. They are trying to build machines that can survive the radiation, but every machine they send in fails. The electronic brains of the robots melt. The camera lenses turn black. The engineers realize, with a heavy, sinking feeling, that the only machine that can function in such an environment is the human body. It is a chilling realization, reached in the quiet of a midnight meeting. To save millions, they will have to use thousands. The paperwork continues. Orders are signed. The bureaucracy of the disaster is as vast as the disaster itself. Every man is given a small, plastic folder for his documents. Every man is given a dose of potassium iodide, a small white pill that tastes like chalk. They are told it is a vitamin. They swallow it with a sip of lukewarm water, unaware that it is a desperate attempt to protect their thyroids from the coming storm. As you lie there, imagine the sound of the wind beginning to pick up. It is a dry, restless wind that carries the scent of the pine forests and the faint, persistent smell of ozone back in the villages surrounding the plant. The evacuation has finally begun. But for the liquidators, the journey is just beginning. They are moving in the opposite direction of the fleeing crowds, while families are being loaded into buses to leave. The liquidators are arriving. They see the abandoned pets wandering the streets. They see the laundry still hanging on the balconies of Pripyat, flapping in the wind like white ghosts. They see the empty swing sets in the parks, moving gently back and forth, as if pushed by invisible children. The soldiers are instructed to set up camps. Imagine the sound of hammers hitting tent peg stink, tink-tinky-coing through the trees. They build pustynia, the desert camps. They sleep on wooden pallets covered in thin blankets. The food is simple: buckwheat kasha, thick slices of black bread, and tea served in rusted tin mugs. Everything is coated in a fine, invisible dust. At night, the camps are quiet. There are no radios, no televisions, just the sound of men breathing and the occasional crackle of a campfire. They sit in the dark, looking toward the horizon where the blue light still flickers. They talk about home. They talk about the gardens they left behind. They wonder when the exercise will be over. One of them, a young engineer named Alexei, sits on a log, sharpening a pencil. He is supposed to be recording the radiation levels, but the numbers are so high they seem meaningless. He looks at his hands. They look the same as they did yesterday. He feels fine. He feels strong. But he notices that the leaves on the trees nearest the camp are falling. Even though it is only the end of April, they are falling in a heavy, silent rain, turning the ground into a carpet of premature autumn. He begins to realize that the rules of the world have been suspended here. The silence isn't peaceful. It's predatory. The liquidator is no longer just a word on a piece of paper. It is a man standing in a field, breathing in the invisible. It is a soldier washing down a road with a hose, watching the water disappear into the soil, knowing that the soil will be hot for 1,000 years. It is a pilot looking down at a ruined roof, feeling the vibration of the atom in his very teeth, as the sun begins to set on these early days of the liquidation. The scale of the task becomes a physical weight. They have to wash every house. They have to kill every stray animal. They have to bury the topsoil. They have to build a giant sarcophagus of steel and concrete to bury the beast. And they will do it. They will do it with a quiet, grim determination that is both beautiful and terrifying to behold. But, for tonight, the work hasn't yet reached its peak. The tunnel isn't yet dug. The roof isn't yet cleared. There is only the arrival. The night is deep now. The stars above the Ukraine are cold and bright, indifferent to the struggles of the men below. The forest is a wall of shadow. Imagine a single bus. It is an old, rattling vehicle with faded paint. It is moving slowly down a narrow road lined with birch trees. The headlights are dim, cutting small tunnels into the gloom. Inside, the men are silent. Some are leaning against each other, swaying with the motion of the bus. The engine is a low, rhythmic thrum beneath your feet, a mechanical vibration that seems to be the only thing keeping the world from dissolving into the mist. Outside the window, the Ukrainian countryside is waking up, but it is a strange, stuttering awakening. The birch trees stand like pale, thin sentinels, their silver bark peeling in the damp air, watching as the convoy of buses crawls deeper into the heart of the silence. Asterisk, there is no chatter now. The men around you, who were joking about the wives in their garden plots just hours ago, have fallen into a heavy, contemplative stillness. You can hear the sound of 1,000 tiny things, the rustle of a wax paper sandwich wrapper, the soft hiss of a match being struck, the long, slow exhale of a man who hasn't slept in 30 hours. The air inside the bus is thick with the scent of cheap tobacco and the metallic temps of old heaters. But as you approach the final checkpoint, the air changes. It becomes cold, not the cold of a winter frost, but a hollow, empty cold. It is as if the heat has been sucked out of the very atoms of the world, as the bus slows to a crawl. Passing through the gates of the exclusion zone, you see the first signs of the invisible guest. On the side of the road, a patch of grass has turned a vibrant, impossible shade of orange, as if it has been scorched by a fire that left no soot. The wind picks up, swirling the dust in little eddies across the asphalt. You watch a single leaf drift against the window pane. It lingers there for a second, a fragile, brown thing, before the wind snatches it away and carries it toward the horizon. You are entering a kingdom where the king is unseen. The bus rounds a final bend in the road, and there it is. The breath catches in your throat. Reactor number 4. It is not a building anymore. It is a wound, a jagged, blackened tooth rising out of the earth, bitten off by an angry god. From this distance, it looks smaller than you expected, yet it feels immense, as if its gravity is pulling the bus toward it. The roof is gone, and in its place is a chaotic tangle of steel girders, twisted like frozen vines, and hunks of concrete that look like they have been chewed and spat out. But it is the color that haunts you. Around the rim of the crater, the debris isn't black or grey. It is a shimmering, iridescent violet. It glows with a soft, sickly light that seems to pulse with a heartbeat of its own. It is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen, and your soul recoils from it with a primal terror you cannot name. The bus stops. The engine cuts out. The silence that follows is so absolute, it feels like a physical weight pressing against your eardrums. There are no birds here, no crickets, not even the hum of a distant fly. There is only the wind, which moans through the hollow pipes of the turbine hall, a long, low whistle that sounds like a flute played by a ghost. The door of the bus creaks open with a sharp, metallic shriek. One by one, the men stand up. Their movements are slow, underwater. They adjust their caps. They tighten the straps of their simple canvas bags. They step down the stairs, their boots hitting the gravel with a sound that seems far too loud for this place. As you step out of the bus, the air hits you. It is sharp. It tastes of copper and old pennies. It makes the back of your throat itch, a dry, persistent tickle that no amount of swallowing can soothe. You feel a strange prickling on your skin, like 1,000 invisible needles dancing on your forearms and the back of your neck. It's as if the air itself is alive, vibrating with a frantic, silent energy. You look at the ground. It is covered in a fine, grey duster powder, so light it seems to defy gravity, hovering just an inch above the soil before settling back down. Metaphors of war come to mind, but they don't fit. In a war, there is a direction to the danger. There is a front line. Here, the danger is everywhere and nowhere. It is in the dust on your boots. It is in the water dripping from a rusted pipe. It is in the very sunlight that warms your face. You are standing in a sea of invisible fire, a bonfire that emits no smoke and casts no shadows. A man beside you, an older soldier with a face like weathered leather, reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, handheld device. It is a dosimeter, a little plastic box with a glass window. He stares at it. He doesn't show anyone the reading. He just tucks it back into his pocket and sighs, a sound that is lost in the vast, empty space of the reactor yard. The wind gusts again, and a cloud of that fine grey dust rises from the ruins. It drifts toward the group, a silent, shimmering curtain. You watch as it settles on the shoulders of the men, turning their dark uniforms a ghostly shade of ash. They don't brush it off. They don't seem to notice. They are looking at the reactor, their eyes wide and reflecting the violet glow of the core. The silence of the site is predatory. It feels as if the environment is watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake. Every breath you take feels heavy, as if you are inhaling lead. You find yourself breathing shallowly, trying to keep the air from reaching too deep into your lungs, but you know it is futile. The air is the enemy, and you cannot stop breathing. You begin to notice the small things. A discarded boot lying in the middle of the road, covered in a thick layer of moss that seems to grow faster than it should. A bicycle leaning against a fence, its metal frame pitted and rusted as if it has been sitting there for 100 years instead of a few days. The world is aging here at an accelerated pace. The atom is a thief of time. The commander of your unit, a man whose voice has been worn down to a raspy whisper, points toward a pile of debris near the base of the reactor wall. There is work to be done. There are stones to be moved. There is soil to be buried. You look at your hands. They look normal. You look at the sun. It looks the same as it did in your village. But you know, with a cold certainty that settles in the pit of your stomach, that everything has changed. The world you knew, the world of cause and effect, of visible dangers and tangible rewards, has ended at the gates of this place. The dust continues to fall. It is a silent rain, a snowfall of the apocalypse. It settles in the creases of your palms. It finds its way into the corners of your eyes. It is the signature of the reactor, 1,000 tiny pieces of a broken star, seeking a home in your flesh. You realize that the liquidator is not just a job title, it is a transformation. You are no longer an observer. You are part of the landscape now. You are absorbing the history of this place, one invisible pulse at a time, a few yards away. A young man, barely 20 years old, stops in his tracks. He is staring at a piece of graphite black, honeycombed block that looks like a burnt brick. It is lying in a puddle of rainwater. The water around the block is boiling, despite the cool morning air. It is a tiny, frantic fountain of steam, hissing quietly in the ruins. The boy reaches out a hand, his fingers trembling. He doesn't touch it, but he holds his palm over it, feeling the warmth. He looks confused, like a child seeing a magic trick for the first time. He doesn't see the invisible beams of light tearing through the cells of his hand. He only feels the heat. He only sees the steam. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of the red forester smell of dying pine and ozone, and for a moment, the violet glow of the reactor seems to brighten, as if the beast is taking a deep, satisfied breath. The work begins. There is no music, no shouting, just the rhythmic clink of shovels and the heavy breathing of men who are already growing tired. The sun climbs higher in the sky, but the light remains flat and grey, filtered through the haze of the zone. You walk toward the edge of a designated area. The ground beneath your boots feels spongy, unstable. You look down. You are standing on a layer of pine needles that have turned a deep, bruised crimson. One of the older men, a miner from the Donbass, with soot permanently etched into the lines of his face, walks past you. He doesn't look at the reactor. He keeps his eyes on the ground. He carries a heavy lead sheet over one shoulder, his muscles straining under the weight. He moves with the grim, plodding pace of someone who knows he is walking into a grave, but who has decided that if he must walk, he will walk with his head up. He stops near a patch of disturbed earth. He takes a breath, a long, ragged sound that echoes in the stillness. He takes a single step forward. His boot sinks into the soft, irradiated soil. A small cloud of dust puffs up around his ankle, clinging to the fabric of his trousers. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't turn back. He simply stands there for a heartbeat, his silhouette framed against the jagged ruins of the fourth power block. A lone figure in a landscape that has forgotten the meaning of life. The invisible enemy surrounds him, silent and patient, waiting for the clock to run out. As you watch him, you feel the weight of the blankets on your own bed. You feel the safety of your own breath. The past is a heavy thing, a story told in the language of dust and silence. Sleep now. The bus has reached its destination. The gates are closed. The men are in the zone, and the night is coming to claim the shadows they leave behind. We will continue their journey in part 5. We will go beneath the earth, into the tunnels where the heat is, a physical wall, and the darkness is absolute. We will follow the miners as they dig for a future they will never see. But for now, let the silence be your comfort. The reactor is quiet. The dust has settled. The sun is high now, but it is a pale, filtered sun, casting long, sickly shadows across the concrete wasteland of the Chernobyl site. We have left the ground behind. We are moving upward, ascending the cold, iron stairs of the neighboring reactor number 3. Each step is a heavy, metallic ring that echoes through the hollow shell of the station. Tonight, we are exploring the highest, most lonely point of the catastrophe. We are going to the roof. Imagine the weight of what you are wearing. This is not the sleek, futuristic armor of a science fiction film. This is the desperate, handmade protection of a biorobot. You are wearing a heavy apron made of sheets of lead, hand-cut and hammered into shape. It weighs nearly 30 kilograms, pressing down on your shoulders, making every breath a conscious struggle. You have lead insoles in your boots and a lead plate protecting your chest and back. Your head is encased in a grey rubber mask with glass circles for eyes. The air inside the mask is hot and smells of stale rubber and your own panicked breath. You are standing in a small, dim hallway just inside, the doorway that leads to the roof of Reactor 3. This particular section of the roof is known as Marcia. It is the most dangerous place on the face of the earth. The silence in this hallway is suffocating. There are 10 of you lined up in the gloom. No one speaks. You can hear the rhythmic, frantic clicking of a Geiger counter held by an officer nearby. It doesn't sound like a machine anymore. It sounds like 1,000 angry insects trapped in a tin box. Tick, 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 tick. The sound is a constant blurring scream of data, telling you that the air you are standing in is saturated with the energy of a dying star. You look at the man in front of you. You can only see his eyes through the goggles. They are wide, the pupils dilated, reflecting the dim light of the corridor. You see the sweat beaded on his forehead. You feel the same damp heat on your own skin. Your hands, encased in thick, clumsy rubber gloves, are gripping the handle of a common shovel. It is a simple tool, a piece of wood and a blade of steel meant for gardens and snow. Here, it is your only weapon against the apocalypse. The plan is simple, yet it feels like a fever dream. The mechanical robots, the sophisticated machines sent from across the world have failed. Their electronic brains were fried by the sheer intensity of the radiation. They died on this roof, their motors seizing, their cameras turning to static. Now, it is up to the biorobots. It is up to you. You will have 90 seconds. 90 seconds to run out onto that roof. Find a chunk of the reactor's heart, a block of glowing graphite or a piece of twisted fuel rod and hurl it over the edge into the gaping maw of the ruined 4th reactor below. If you stay for 2 minutes, your life is shortened by years. If you stay for 5, you will never leave the hospital. You wait. The officer looks at his stopwatch. The air in the hallway seems to thicken, turning into a heavy syrup that is hard to push through. You can hear your own heartbeat. Thump, 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 a slow, steady drum in the cavern of your chest. You think of the world outside this place. You think of the wind in the trees, the sound of a river, the taste of a cold glass of water. It all feels like a memory from a different life. Then the bell rings. It is a sharp, electric jangle that pierces through the rubber of your mask. The door is thrown open. You burst out into the light, and for a second you were blinded. The roof of Masha is a hellscape of grey and black. The sun is bright, but the atmosphere is hazy, shimmering with heat and something else, a distortion in the air. Like the ripples over a hot pavement, you feel the radiation immediately. It isn't a pain, not yet. It is a sensation of being physically struck by a heavy wind that isn't blowing. Your skin begins to prickle and itch, as if thousands of invisible ants are crawling over you. There is a metallic taste in your mouth, so strong it feels like you are chewing on a lead pipe. Your eyes begin to sting, and the glass of your goggles starts to fog from your frantic breathing. You run. The lead apron swings against your thighs, a rhythmic, heavy thud. Your boots crunch on the debris. The roof is littered with the bones of the reactor. You see it. A block of graphite, the size of a loaf of bread. It is black, charred, and it seems to vibrate against the grey concrete of the roof. As you approach it, the clicking of the Geiger counters from the doorway becomes a solid, unbroken roar. You can feel the heat radiating from the stone, a dry, parched heat that sucks the moisture from your throat. You thrust the shovel under the graphite. It is heavy, much heavier than it looks. You heave it upward, your muscles straining against the weight of the lead suit and the stone. You turn toward the edge of the roof, where the jagged remains of Reactor 4 loom like a blackened cathedral. You toss the stone. You watch it fall, a slow-motion arc against the pale sky, disappearing into the smoke and the shadows of the abyss. You don't stop to watch. You turn back. You find a piece of twisted metal, a fragment of a fuel assembly. It is glowing with a faint, ghostly blue light in the shadows. You shovel it up. Your breath is coming in ragged, shallow gasps now. The glass of your mask is so foggy you can barely see. You are operating on instinct, a biological machine, performing a repetitive task in the heart of a storm. The world around you is a blur of grey concrete and violet light. You see another man a few yards away. He is struggling with a large chunk of concrete. You want to help him, but there is no time. The seconds are ticking away in your head. 40 seconds. The air feels like it is vibrating. You hear a sound like a high-tension wire snapping over and over again. It is the sound of the very air being torn apart by the energy of the core. You feel a sudden, sharp headache behind your eyes, a pulsing pressure that makes the world tilt. You find another piece of debris. You throw it. 60 seconds. Your legs feel like they are made of lead. The exhaustion is sudden and total. It's as if the energy is being drained out of your cells by the environment. Your movements slow down. The shovel feels like it weighs 100 kilograms. You look at your hands. The rubber of the gloves is covered in a fine, grey dust. This dust is the most dangerous substance on Earth, and it is inches from your skin. You look toward the door. The officer is standing there, shielded by a lead wall, waving his arm frantically. He is a small, distant figure in a world of giants. 70 seconds. You stumble over a piece of cable. You fall to one knee, and for a moment, you are staring directly at the surface of the roof. You see the individual grains of dust, the tiny cracks in the bitumen. You realize that every square inch of this place is screaming with invisible fire. You push yourself up. The effort is monumental. Your heart is racing now, a frantic, fluttering thing in your throat. You find one last piece of graphite. It is small, but you grab it anyway. You hurl it with the last of your strength. 80 seconds. You turn and run toward the door. The crunch of your boots on the roof sounds like breaking glass. The air in your lungs is hot and tastes of ozone. You can see the doorway, the beautiful, dark safety of the hallway. You see the other men huddled there, waiting to pull you in. The prickling on your skin has turned into a dull, throbbing burn. Your vision is narrowing, a tunnel of grey light focusing on the threshold of the door. 85 seconds. You reach the edge of the roof. You step over a final tangle of wires. The officer is screaming something, but you can't hear him over the roar in your ears. You can only see his lips moving. You reach the doorway. Strong hands grab the straps of your lead apron. They pull you inside, dragging you away from the light, away from the roof, away from the monster. The door is slammed shut. The metallic bang echoes through the hallway, a final, definitive end to the madness. You lean against the cold concrete wall. Someone pulls the mask off your head. The air in the hallway feels freezing, like a plunge into an ice bath. You take a deep, ragged breath of the filtered air. It tastes like heaven, but the silence is gone. The Geiger counter is still screaming. You look at your hands. They are shaking. You look at the men around you. They are all staring at the floor, their faces pale and slick with sweat. No one celebrates. No one cheers. They just stand there, in the heavy, radioactive gloom, waiting for their heart rates to slow down. You feel a strange, hollow sensation in your chest. You have just spent 90 seconds on the roof of the world. You have seen the heart of the machine. And though you have stepped back into the shadows, you know that a part of part of your very DNA, has been left behind on that grey concrete dot. The officer looks at his stopwatch. He looks at the next man in line. He nods. The bell rings again. As you lie in your bed tonight, feel the stillness of your room. Feel the steady, calm rhythm of your own breathing. The air is clear. The ground is solid. The roof is a world away, a memory trapped in lead and concrete. But listen to the silence. Listen to the way the darkness holds the secrets of the past. The countdown is starting again. For someone else, somewhere else, 10.9.8. The clock never truly stops. It only resets. 7.6.5. Sleep now. Let the numbers fade. Let the weight of the lead apron be lifted from your shoulders. You are safe. You are home. 4.3.2. The world is quiet. 1.0. The adrenaline has begun to retreat now, leaving behind a hollow, echoing fatigue that settles into your marrow like lead. Imagine you are sitting on the edge of a wooden bench in a temporary shower block, just a few kilometers from the reactor site. The water is running a lukewarm, persistent stream that smells faintly of river silt and chlorine. You are scrubbing your skin. You scrub until it is raw, until the soap suds turn a dull grey, trying to wash away a dust that you cannot see. But as you look at your hands in the flickering light of a bare bulb, you realize that the water is just gliding over the surface. The weight you feel isn't on your skin. It is inside you. We explore the quiet after the storm. We are moving into the days following the liquidation, where the invisible enemy begins to make itself known, not with a bang or a scream, but with a series of gentle, terrifying whispers from within the body. Feel the heavy, velvet darkness of the room around you. Let the world outside dissolve into the mist of the Pripyat marshes. We are entering the stage of the walking ghost. The first thing you notice is the taste. It is a persistent, cloying flavor that coats the roof of your mouth and the back of your throat. It tastes like you have been sucking on a rusted iron nail, or perhaps a copper coin. No matter how much water you drink, no matter how many times you rinse your mouth with the harsh, stat-issued tea, the metallic taste remains. It is the taste of the air near the reactor, a signature of the ionized atmosphere that has followed you home, or rather, has become a part of your very breath, as you sit in the silence of the transport truck heading back to the camp. The world seems to have lost its sharp edges. The trees passing by look blurred, as if you are viewing them through a veil of thin, grey silk. You feel a strange, ethereal lightness in your head, dizzying, floating sensation that makes the heavy vibration of the truck feel distant, as if it is happening to someone else's body. You reach up to touch your face. Your skin feels tight. It feels like you have spent a long, reckless day at the beach under a midsummer sun. It is a dry, prickling heat that radiates from your cheeks and your forehead. When you look in the small, cracked mirror in the barracks, you see a face you barely recognize. You are tanned, but it is a deep, unnatural mahogany, a color that doesn't belong to the spring. It is the nuclear tan, the mark of a man who has stood in the path of a silent sun. The fatigue comes next. It is not the healthy tiredness that follows a day of hard labor in the fields. It is a crushing, absolute exhaustion that feels like your bones have been replaced with heavy stone. Imagine trying to lift your arm to take a sip of water. The movement feels monumental. Your muscles are slow to respond, as if the connection between your mind and your limbs has been frayed. You find yourself sitting on your cot, staring at your boots for minutes at a time, unable to find the energy to unlace them. The world has become a slow-motion film, and you are trapped in the frames, moving through a thick, invisible syrup. The camp is quiet at night, but it is a restless quiet. You can hear the sound of men coughing, a dry, hacking sound that echoes through the canvas walls of the tents. There is a sense of shared, unspoken knowledge. No one talks about the taste in their mouths. No one talks about the way their skin burns in the cool night air. To speak of it is to make it real, and for now, the liquidators prefer the sanctuary of the silence. As you lie on your thin mattress, the darkness seems to pulse. You feel a rhythmic throb behind your eyes, a dull pressure that keeps time with the ticking of a watch. You think of the roof. You think of the 90 seconds of madness. You remember the way the air shimmered, and you realize that you didn't just see the radiation, you inhaled it. It is now a part of your blood, a part of the very cells that make you who you are. The days begin to blend together. You find yourself standing in line for food, but the smell of the buckwheat kasha makes your stomach turn. The nausea is a constant companion now, a low-level seasickness that never quite goes away. You take a bite of bread, and it tastes like ash. You see your friends, men you have worked beside for weeks, and you notice the changes in them too. Their eyes look sunken, shadowed by dark circles that look like bruises. They move with the same plodding, heavy grace that you do. One morning, you wake up and find a small patch of hair on your pillow. You touch your head, and a few more strands come away in your fingers, silent and effortless. You look at them in the palm of your hand. They are fine, silver blonde threads, shimmering in the light. You don't panic. You don't cry out. You simply blow them away, watching them drift to the floor like dust. The warnings from the doctors are gentle, almost whispered. Drink plenty of fluids, they say. Take your vitamins. Rest when you can. They don't tell you that your bone marrow is failing to produce new life. They don't tell you that your DNA has been unzipped like a coat. They treat you with a strange, reverent kindness, as if you are already a memory. You are a walking ghost. This is the period where the body, though fundamentally broken, maintains a facade of health. You can still walk. You can still talk. You can even still work, if the need is great enough. But the foundation has been washed away. Imagine walking through the streets of a nearby village that hasn't been fully evacuated yet. You see an old woman sitting on a bench, knitting. She looks at you, and for a second her eyes widen. She sees the tan. She sees the way you carry your shoulders, as if you are supporting the weight of the sky. She knows. The people of the land have an instinct for death that the scientists in the cities have lost. She makes the sign of the cross as you pass, a silent prayer for the man who is already halfway to the stars. The air in the exclusion zone remains beautiful. That is the greatest cruelty of all. The sun continues to shine. The flowers continue to bloom in the abandoned gardens, their colors more vivid than ever, fueled by a strange, chaotic energy in the soil. The bees hum over the blossoms, unaware that their hives are becoming tombs. You stand in a field of wildflowers, and the scent is overwhelming, sweet, heavy, and intoxicating. But you know that every petal is a trap. As the weeks pass, the walking part of the ghost phase begins to end. The fatigue becomes a permanent state of being. You find yourself being moved from the camp to a local infirmary, and then, eventually, to a train. The train is long and quiet, filled with men who look just like you. The windows are sealed. The air is filtered. You lie on a bunk, watching the telegraph poles fly past, a rhythmic thrum-thrum that lulls you into a shallow, dreamless sleep. You are heading toward Moscow, toward Hospital Number 6. Imagine the sound of the train wheels slowing down, the metallic screech of the brakes, the doors opening to a cold, sterile platform. You are placed on a stretcher. You don't protest. It feels good to let someone else carry the weight for a while. You are moved through a series of long, white corridors. The lights overhead are fluorescent, flickering with a pale, blue-green hum. The floors are polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the legs of the doctors and nurses as they move past you. The air here doesn't taste like metal. It tastes of alcohol, iodine, and the sharp, clean scent of bleach. The silence here is different from the silence of the reactor. It is a clinical silence, a silence of observation. You are placed in a room with white walls and a large window. Through the window, you can see the tops of the trees in a Moscow park. People are walking their dogs. Children are playing. The world is continuing, oblivious to the fact that you have returned from the edge of the abyss. You lie in the bed, the white sheets feeling incredibly soft against your sensitized skin. Every touch, even the brush of the fabric, feels like a faint electric shock. You look at your arms. The tan is fading now, replaced by a waxen, translucent paleness. You can see the veins beneath your skin, branching like the deltas of dark rivers. A nurse enters the room. She is wearing a thick lead apron over her uniform and a mask that covers most of her face. She moves softly, her footsteps muffled by rubber soles. She checks your temperature. She checks your pulse. She doesn't meet your eyes. She leaves, and the door clicks shut behind her. You are alone in the white room. You listen to the sound of your own heart. It is a slow, rhythmic beat, a fading echo of the man who walked onto the roof of Reactor 3. You think of the graphite. You think of the blue light. You realize that you didn't just liquidate the consequences of the accident. You liquidated yourself. But there is no regret. In the deep, quiet spaces of your mind, there is only a strange, cold peace. You did what was asked. You stood in the gap. You held the shield as you drift off to sleep tonight. Let the image of that white corridor be the last thing you see. It is a place of rest. A place where the struggle ends. The taste of metal is gone now, replaced by the neutral, empty scent of the hospital air. The silence is absolute. The hallway outside your door stretches on forever, a long, glowing tunnel of white light. You can hear the distant, rhythmic squeak of a nurse's cart, a sound that becomes a lullaby, a gentle reminder that you are being watched over, that you are not forgotten, the ghost is tired. It is time to let the light carry you the rest of the way. The white walls of Hospital Number 6 do not speak. They are silent witnesses, coated in layer upon layer of thick, glossy enamel paint so thick that they seem to absorb the very sounds of the world outside. Here, in the heart of Moscow, the spring of 1986 feels like a distant memory, a story told in a language that no one here is allowed to speak anymore. We step into the quietest rooms of the catastrophe. We are moving into the wards where the brave men of the first 24 hours have been brought to rest. But this is not a place of healing in the way we usually understand it. It is a place of observation, a place of high-stakes denial, and a place where the human heart is forced to say goodbye without ever using the words as you settle into your blankets. Let your breath slow. Imagine the sound of a clock ticking in a long, sterile hallway. Imagine the smell of ozone, floor wax, and the faint, sweet scent of wilting flowers in a glass vase. We are going to explore the loneliness of the hero. The doctors here are among the best in the world. They move through the corridors like ghosts in white coats, their faces set in masks of professional calm. But if you look closely at their eyes, you see a flickering shadow of something else. It is the look of a man who has been trained to fight an enemy he can see, only to find himself wrestling with a ghost dot in the first few days. There is a strange, brittle atmosphere of denial. The official reports still speak of a localized incident. The newspapers talk about the heroic efforts to stabilize the situation. But in the wards, the truth is written on the skin of the patients. The doctors examine the firefighters, the boys from the roof. They look at the nuclear tans that have now begun to darken into something more sinister. They see the blisters that appear out of nowhere, not on the surface of the skin, but deep beneath it, as if the men are being burned from the inside out. They see the way the blood counts are dropping, falling like stones into a dark well. The realization doesn't come all at once. It arrives in a series of quiet, devastating moments. A doctor holds an X-ray up to the light and sees that the bone marrow is simply gone. It hasn't been damaged. It has been deleted. A nurse tries to take a blood sample, and the vein collapses like a dry straw. The doctors realize that they aren't treating a burn or a sickness. They are watching a biological unraveling. They are watching the very blueprints of life being erased. But the orders from above remain the same. Maintain order. Do not cause panic. This is a state secret. And so, the hospital becomes a fortress of secrets. Imagine being the wife of one of these men. Your name is You have traveled hundreds of miles, your heart a frantic bird in your chest, to find your husband. You arrive at the hospital, but you are stopped at the door. You are told he is stable. You are told he is resting. When you are finally allowed to see him, the rules are terrifying. Do not touch him, the nurse whispers, her eyes darting to the door. Do not kiss him. Do not sit on the bed. You enter the room, and the silence hits you like a physical blow. Your husband, the man who was laughing and lifting you in his arms just a week ago, looks like a stranger. He is behind a plastic curtain, thin, translucent barrier that is supposed to protect him from the world, but in reality, it is there to protect the world from him. He smiles when he sees you. It is a weak, flickering smile, but it is still him. He tries to tell you he feels better. He talks about the summer, about the dacha, about the fishing trip he wants to take. He is in the walking ghost phase, that cruel window of time where the body pretends to be okay. You want to reach through the plastic. You want to take his hand and tell him that everything will be fine. But you see the lead apron the nurse is wearing. You see the way the doctors stand at a distance. You realize that the man you love has become a source of energy. He is no longer just a person. He is a reactor in human form. The separation is a quiet, agonizing thing. In the hallways, the families gather. They sit on the hard wooden benches, their shoulders slumped, their eyes fixed on the doors of the wards. They bring jars of homemade soup, bunches of lilacs, and handwritten notes from the children. They talk in whispers, as if the walls themselves are listening. They say it was just a fire, one woman says, her voice trembling. They say they'll be home in a month, another replies, but she doesn't look up from her knitting. They are all participating in a collective act of hope, a desperate bridge built over a chasm of truth. They know, in that deep, ancestral part of their souls, that something is terribly wrong. They can feel the heaviness in the air. They can see the way the doctors look away when they ask a direct question. But in the Soviet Union of 1986, the truth is a dangerous thing to hold. So they hold on to the soup jars instead. Back in the rooms, the slow, silent work of the atom continues. The patients are beginning to lose their hair in great, soft clumps. Their voices are becoming raspy, reduced to a dry whisper. They spend hours staring out the window at the trees, watching the leaves move in the Moscow wind. They are thinking of the Pripyat River. They are thinking of the morning mist over the marshes. They are realizing, with a soft, hollow sadness, that they will never go back. The doctors, too, are suffering. They go home at night and wash their clothes 10 times over. They can't sleep. They lie in the dark and think of the men in the wardsmen who are essentially being eaten by the air they breathed. They feel a sense of profound helplessness. All their years of study, all their medals and diplomas, mean nothing in the face of a broken atom. One doctor, a woman with tired eyes and grey-streaked hair, sits in her office late at night. The only light comes from a small desk lamp. She is writing a report. She wants to write the word radiation. She wants to write lethal dose, but her pen hovers over the paper. She knows that if she writes those words, the report will be confiscated. It will vanish into a file that will never be opened. So she writes acute respiratory failure. She writes thermal burns. She uses the language of the state to hide the tragedy of the person. She cries silently, the tears falling onto the official stationery, blurring the ink of the lies she is forced to tell. The distance between the patients and their families grows wider every day. The plastic curtains are replaced by glass walls. The smiles become harder to maintain. The conversations through the intercoms are filled with long, heavy pause silences where the only thing that can be heard is the sound of a respirator or the distant, rhythmic hum of the hospital's ventilation system. The men in the beds are becoming translucent. Their skin is so thin you can see the pulse of their hearts. They look like ivory carvings, beautiful and fragile. They are drifting away from the world of noise and politics, into a world of pure white light. Imagine one of them, perhaps Vasily, the firefighter we met in the beginning. He is lying in the dark. He can hear the sound of the city outside, the honk of a car, the faint siren of a distant ambulance. It feels like a dream. The only thing that feels real is the memory of the blue beam. He remembers how beautiful it was. He remembers the way the air felt on the roof. He realizes that he gave his life for a city that is now empty. He gave his life for a secret that is being kept from his own wife. He wants to write a letter. He asks the nurse for a piece of paper and a pen. His hands are shaking so badly he can barely hold the pen, but he begins to write. He doesn't write about the reactor. He doesn't write about the pain. He writes about the first time he saw Ludmilla at the dance in the village. He writes about the way the sun looked on the wheat fields. He writes about the name he wants for the baby if it's a girl, Natasha. If it's a boy, Sasha. He writes with a desperate, fading energy. The letters sprawling across the page in a jagged, frantic dance. Do not be afraid, he writes at the end. I am just resting. I will see you in the morning. He folds the paper carefully, his fingers fumbling with the edges. He places it under his pillow. He plans to give it to her the next day, when she comes to the window. But the next day, the walking ghost phase ends. The body can no longer sustain the illusion. The light in the room seems to grow brighter, or perhaps his eyes are just losing their grip on the shadows. The nurse comes in. She sees the letter sticking out from under the pillow. She knows the rules. No items can leave the room. Everything in this room is hot. Everything is contaminated. The paper, the ink, the very thoughts written on it are now part of the exclusion zone. She looks at Vasily. He is sleeping now, a deep, heavy sleep from which he will not wake. She reaches out and takes the letter. She looks at the envelope. It has no address, only a name written in a shaky, beautiful hand. She walks to the door. In the hallway, there is a large yellow bin marked with a symbol of the atom, the three-leafed clover of the end of the world. She stands there for a long time. She looks at the letter, and then she looks at the door where Ludmilla is waiting, her face pressed against the glass 3 floors below. The nurse's hand trembles. She feels the weight of the paper, the weight of a man's last words, his last connection to the world of the living. But the silence of the hospital is absolute. The rules of the state are iron. She lets go of the letter. It falls into the bin with a soft, papery hiss. It lands among the discarded bandages, the rubber gloves, and the broken glass. It is gone. The words, the names for the baby, the memory of the dancehall of it is now part of the liquidation. The hallway is empty. The lights flicker downstairs. A woman waits by the window, watching the sunset over the Moscow skyline, waiting for a sign that never comes. As you lie in your bed, feel the peace of your own voice, the safety of your own words. The letters you write will be delivered. The hands you hold will stay warm. The white corridor is long, and the doors are all closed. The sun of 1986 has set now, slipping behind the jagged teeth of the horizon and leaving the world in a long, lingering twilight. We have traveled far together. We have stood in the shadow of the blue beam, felt the grit of the grey dust on our tongues, and walked the sterile, white hallways of the Moscow wards. But tonight, our journey reaches its final, quietest chapter. We are looking at the cost not in rubles or megawatts, but in the soft, unspoken currency of human lives. We are talking about the aftermath, the legacy, and the heavy silence that follows a sacrifice no one was supposed to talk about. As you lie there, let your body sink deeper into the mattress. Feel the weight of the air in your room, clean, cool, and still. The story we are finishing tonight is a heavy one, but it ends with a profound, somber peace. It is the story of how hundreds of thousands of men and women quietly laid down their futures so that the world could have one. Close your eyes. Imagine a vast, empty field in the heart of the Ukraine. The wind is moving through the tall grass, a soft, rushing sound like the breath of the earth itself. The liquidation did not end when the fire went out. It did not end when the last piece of graphite was hurled into the abyss. It continued for years, a slow-moving tide of human effort. 600,000 people. Think of that number. If they stood hand in hand, they would form a line stretching from the ruins of the reactor all the way to the Baltic Sea. They were the liquidators. And as the years passed, they became a forgotten army. Imagine one of those men 10 years later. His name is Pieter. He is living in a small apartment in a city far away from the exclusion zone. He sits by the window, watching the rain wash the dust from the glass. He looks healthy to the casual observer, but he knows better. He feels the fatigue that never truly left him after that summer in the zone. It is a deep, resonant hum in his bones, a reminder of the invisible fire he carried home in his blood. He has a medal in a drawer, small, bronze star with the image of a drop of blood and the symbol of the atom. It is the order of the liquidator. He doesn't wear it. To wear it is to invite questions that are too heavy to answer. To wear it is to remember the taste of metal and the smell of the red forest. The cost of the silence was perhaps the heaviest burden of all in the years following the accident. The official records remained blurred. The numbers were adjusted, smoothed over by the hands of bureaucrats who wanted the world to forget. They said only 31 people died, but Pieter knows the truth. He remembers the men he shared Kasha with in the tent cities. He remembers the letters that stopped coming. He remembers the names that began to appear on black granite stones in cemeteries across the Soviet Union. The sacrifice was unspoken. It was a contract signed in the dark, where the price was paid in the decades to follow. Think of the miners. They returned to their dark seams in the earth, but their lungs carried the dust of the reactor. Think of the helicopter pilots who flew into the blue light. They retired to quiet lives, their bodies slowly turning into maps of the invisible war they had fought. They didn't ask for monuments. They didn't ask for fame. They simply went back to their lives, carrying the secret of their own slow undoing. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine the exclusion zone as it is today. The silence there is no longer predatory. It has become a sanctuary. The city of Pripyat is being reclaimed by the earth. The roots of the trees are lifting the asphalt of the roads, turning the streets into forests. The vines are climbing the walls of the apartment blocks, reaching through the broken windows to touch the wallpaper that hasn't seen a human face in 40 years. Nature has a way of forgiving what man cannot. The wolves have returned to the zone. They move through the tall grass like grey shadows, their howls echoing off the concrete shells of the power plant. The horses of the steppe wander through the abandoned villages, grazing on the wild apples that no one will ever pick. The air is clear now. The dust has settled deep into the soil, buried under layers of fallen leaves and the patient, slow-moving hands of time, but the cost remains. It is found in the quiet conversations in the veterans' hospitals. It is found in the eyes of the mothers who still look at old photographs of their sons in metal helmets. It is found in the way the world treats the atom with a newfound, trembling respect. The liquidators gave us the gift of time. They bought the world a second chance with 90 seconds of their lives. They stood at the edge of the volcano and shoveled the lava back into the earth. And then they stepped back and let the silence swallow them. There is a profound beauty in that kind of courage. It is the courage of the ordinary. It is the bravery of the man who does what is necessary, not because he wants to be a hero, but because he cannot imagine doing anything else. Tonight, we honor that silence. Imagine a small memorial. It is not in a crowded square in Moscow or a busy street in Kiev. It is in the middle of the exclusion zone, near the bridge they call the Bridge of Death. It is a simple stone, overgrown with moss and surrounded by wildflowers. There are no names on it. There is only a single carved sentence: to those who saved the world. The wind blows across the stone. carrying the scent of pine and the distant rhythmic hum of the new sarcophagus, the giant silver arch that now covers the ruins. A shield of steel that will last for 100 years. The beast is sleeping now, buried under a mountain of metal and the collective memory of a generation. You are safe. The world is quiet. The liquidators are resting now. Their work is finished. The metallic taste is a ghost of a ghost. The fire is a cold ember. The white corridors have reached their end. As you sink into the final depths of sleep, let the image of that quiet memorial be your guide. See it in your mind's eye, the soft green of the grass, the grey of the stone, and the vast, peaceful sky of the Ukraine stretching out forever. There is no more fear. There is no more pain. There is only the long, slow exhale of history. The story is over. The lesson is learned. Sleep now, under the protection of the shield they built for you. Let the darkness be a soft, velvet curtain. You are part of the future they bought. You are the reason they stood on the roof. Asterisk, the night is long, and the stars are bright. The silence is finally, truly peaceful. Imagine you are standing in the middle of a street where no car has driven for 40 years. The asphalt is no longer a solid path. It is a mosaic of grey shards, pushed upward by the insistent, patient fingers of the earth. Green moss, as soft as velvet, carpets the sidewalks. The silence here isn't empty. It is a dense, living thing, the sound of a world that has finally caught its breath after the fever of the 20th century. We conclude our journey by stepping into the afterlife of the catastrophe. We are looking at the exclusion zone not as a place of death, but as a place of profound, haunting transformation. This is the story of what happens when humanity leaves the room and forgets to turn out the lights. As you lie there, let your breathing find a slow, steady rhythm. In, out, like the swaying of the birch trees in the Ukrainian wind. We are going to walk through the ghost city of Pripyat. One last time. The city of the future is now a forest with windows. Imagine walking into a classroom in middle school number 3. The door is slightly ajar, hanging on a single, rusted hinge that groans softly as the breeze catches it. On the floor, thousands of gas masks lie scattered like the husks of giant insects, their glass eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. They were never used. They sit there in the dust, a testament to a threat that the residents thought would come from the sky, not from the earth. On a wooden desk, a notebook lies open. The paper is yellowed and brittle, but you can still see the elegant, cursive Cyrillic script of a child practicing their grammar. The ink has faded to a ghostly brown. In the corner of the room, a piano stands draped in shadow. Its wooden casing has warped in the damp air, and the keys are ivory teeth, frozen in a silent chord. If you were to press one, it wouldn't make a sound, just a dry clack of wood on wood. This is the long-term consequence, the freezing of time in the rest of the world. 40 years is a lifetime of change. In Pripyat, it is a single, long afternoon. The Soviet posters on the walls, once vibrant red and gold, are now peeling away in long, decorative ribbons, revealing the grey concrete beneath. The Atomic Cafe, where workers once drank tea and discussed the day's shifts, is now a grotto of rusted metal and ferns. But look closer at the windows. Nature does not mourn. It reclaims. The trees don't care about the radiation. They have adapted, their DNA shifting in subtle, mysterious ways to thrive in the exclusion zone. Thick vines of ivy have climbed the sides of the 16-story apartment blocks. weaving through the balconies like green veins. From a distance, the buildings look like ancient ruins from a civilization that vanished thousands of years ago, rather than a few decades. The red forest, which we spoke of in the beginning, has lived through its namesake. The trees that turned ginger and died in the first days were buried, but new ones have grown in their place. These trees are different. Their branches sometimes grow in strange, twisted spirals, as if they are trying to map the invisible energy in the soil. Yet, they are lush. They are vibrant. The animals have returned in a great, silent migration, without the noise of engines, the glare of streetlights, or the presence of hunters. The zone has become a Garden of Eden with a hidden sting. Imagine a lynx, its tufted ears twitching, padding silently through the lobby of the Palace of Culture. It moves across the shattered glass of the chandeliers, its golden eyes reflecting the pale light filtering through the skylight. It doesn't know about Röntgens or isotopes. It only knows that this is its territory now. In the marshes, the Perciwalski's horses rear, prehistoric-looking creatures with thick manes roam in wild herds. They gallop across the cooling pond's edge, their hooves kicking up the dust that the liquidators once fought so hard to bury. The wolves howl from the rooftops of the abandoned hospitals, their voices carrying for miles across the empty plains. The zone has become a laboratory of the soul. It shows us that life is more resilient than we ever imagined, and that our presence on this planet is more fragile than we care to admit. There are still people here, though mostly elderly women. They returned to their ancestral villages shortly after the evacuation, refusing to leave the land where their grandfathers were buried. Imagine a small wooden cottage on the edge of the zone. A thin plume of blue smoke rises from the chimney. Inside, an old woman named Hannah sits by a Castian stove. She eats potatoes grown in the radioactive soil. She drinks water from a well that the scientists say is contaminated. "If I leave, I die," she says in a voice as dry as autumn leaves. The radiation is a ghost. You cannot see it. But the loneliness is a wolf that eats you alive. She lives in a world of ghosts, but she is happy. She has her garden, her cats, and the silence of the forest. She represents the human spirit's refusal to be evicted from its home, even when that home has become a forbidden place. As the sun sets over the sarcophagus, the great silver arch catches the last light of day. It looks like a fallen moon, a gleaming, futuristic tomb designed to last for 100 years. Beneath it, the ruins of Reactor 4 are finally still. The molten elephant's foot, that lethal mass of fuel and glasses cooling in the dark. Its roar reduced to a faint, subatomic whisper. The cost of the liquidation was high. But the result is this: a quiet world. A place where the lessons of the past are written in the rust and the leaves. We are the children of this history. We live in the world that the liquidators saved. Every time we look at a clear blue sky or drink a glass of clean water, we are experiencing the legacy of the men who stood on the roof. They took the fire so that we could have the light. The clock is ticking, but it is no longer a countdown to disaster. It is the steady, slow heartbeat of a planet that is healing itself. One leaf at a time, feel the weight of your own body as it sinks into the bed. You are part of the long-term consequence, too. You are the memory. By listening to this story, you ensure that the names of the firefighters, the miners, and the biorobots are not lost to the dust. The exclusion zone is a mirror. It shows us our power to destroy, but also our incredible capacity to sacrifice and the Earth's infinite ability to recover. The wind is dying down now. The wolves are settling into their dens. The horses are standing still in the tall grass, their heads bowed. The city of Pripyat is a silhouette against the stars, a ghost ship sailing through the sea of time. In your room, the shadows are long and soft. The air is still. You have reached the end of the road. There are no more reactors to fight. There are no more white hallways to walk. There is only the sleep. Think of a single clock, sitting on a mantle in an abandoned apartment in Pripyat. Its batteries died long ago, but in the silence of your mind, you can still hear the phantom sound of its mechanism. It is a soft, rhythmic sound, fading, fading. The room is perfectly still now. The journey we have taken together through the mist, the fire, and the silent corridors of 1986 has brought us to this final threshold. Take a long, slow breath. Feel the coolness of the air as it enters your lungs, and as you exhale, let go of any tension remaining in your shoulders or your hands. We have traveled through the heart of a nightmare to find a profound truth. Tonight, we settled the question that began our journey: why you wouldn't last 24 hours as a Chernobyl. Liquidator. It is not a question of physical strength. It is not about how much weight you can carry or how fast you can run. It is about the fundamental, invisible pact between a human being and the world they inhabit. To be a liquidator was to step into a reality where the rules of life were suspended, where the very air was no longer a gift, but a debt, as you lie in the safety of the present. Imagine stepping out of that bus one last time. Why wouldn't you last? Because within the first hour, the invisible enemy would have already begun its work. Without the specialized knowledge that only hindsight provides, you would breathe deeply of that metallic air. You would marvel at the violet glow of the reactor, not knowing that every photon of that beautiful light was a tiny subatomic bullet. You wouldn't last because your senses, the very tools, evolved over millions of years to keep you safe, would betray you. Your eyes would see a sunny day. Your ears would hear the gentle rustle of the leaves. Your nose would smell the sweet pine of the forest. Everything in your biology would tell you that you were safe, while every cell in your body was being quietly, systematically dismantled. To last 24 hours as a liquidator required more than survival. It required a total surrender of the self. Think of the men we met, the firefighters who stood in the graphite snow. They didn't last in the way we think of longevity. Their bodies began to fail within minutes, yet they stayed for hours. They stayed because they were the only thing standing between the fire and the world. To be a liquidator was to exist in a state of biological bankruptcy. By the 12th hour, the taste of metal would have moved from your tongue to your soul. The fatigue wouldn't feel like tiredness. It would feel like your gravity had been doubled. By the 18th hour, the nuclear tan would be darkening your skin, a mark of a transformation that cannot be reversed. And by the 24th hour, you would be a walking ghost. You wouldn't last because the environment of Chernobyl in April 1986 was not meant for life. It was a glimpse into the heart of a star, a place where time and matter behaved differently. To survive, therefore, even a day was to consume a lifetime of energy. But as we conclude this story, I want you to shift your focus away from the danger and toward the understanding. We look back at the liquidators not with pity, but with a quiet, solemn honor. They were the ones who took the burden of the 20th century upon their shoulders. They were ordinary men, fathers, sons, brothers, who were asked to do the impossible. And they did it with a stoicism that is almost impossible to comprehend today. They were the liquidators, because they liquidated the debt of human error. They paid the price for a future they would never see. Imagine a map of the world. Now, imagine a shadow spreading from that small point in northern Ukraine. If not for the 600,000 who answered the call, that shadow would have touched every corner of the map. It would have touched the fields where your food grows. It would have touched the water your children drink. The liquidators are the reason. The world stayed green dot as you drift toward sleep. Think of the silence of the exclusion zone today. It is a peaceful silence now. It is the silence of a wound that has finally scarred over. The new safe confinement, the giant silver arch sits over the ruins like a silent guardian. It is a monument to human ingenuity, but also to human sacrifice. The liquidators are no longer just names on a list or faces in a grainy black and white photograph. They are the wind in the trees of the Red Forest. They are the clean water of the Pripyat River. They are the very stillness of the night you are enjoying right now. You wouldn't last 24 hours as a liquidator, because you were meant to live in the world they saved. You were meant to sleep in a bed that isn't contaminated. You were meant to breathe air that doesn't taste of copper dot. Their sacrifice was the purchase of your normalcy. Let that thought be a comfort to you. Let it settle over you like a warm, heavy blanket. The war is over. The long shift on the roof is finished. The shovels have been laid down. The lead aprons have been hung up for the last time. The history of Chernobyl is a heavy one, but it is also a story of the incredible light of the human spirit. It is a reminder that even in the darkest, most radioactive night, there are those who will carry the lamp. The world is quiet. The stars over the Ukraine are cold and distant, watching over the empty streets of Pripyat and the sleeping forests of the zone. The animals are resting in the ruins. The ghost city is at peace. Thank you for staying with me through these 10 chapters. Thank you for honoring the memory of those who stood in the gap. Your eyes are heavy now. The weight of the world has lifted, leaving only the soft, rhythmic breathing of the night. The story has reached its end, and the past has returned to the shadows where it belongs. You are safe. You are home in the distance. Imagine a single small candle burning in a window in a city far away. It is a light for the liquidators. It is a light for the future. As the candle flickers and fades, let your mind drift into the deep, dark blue of sleep. There are no more ticking clocks. There are no more alarms. There is only the long, beautiful silence of a world at rest. Good night, brave soul.